morning, everyone, and good evening for people in India. Welcome to our global segment, last session, and we were keeping the best for the last. It's one of my favorite sessions. We are going to talk about future of transportation, and I have invited two very, very amazing and dear friends of mine to talk about their vision. But before I tell you about them, let's talk a little bit about the stats. There are close to 86 million cars sold every year globally. Guess how many cars India produces? India is doing close to 4.4 million passenger cars and light trucks. In US, the number is 4.7 million plus 17 million light trucks. Look at the contrast. 1.3 billion population, and in America is 300 million population. So what are the challenges? So when I start talking about it from my panelist, it was very interesting, and we agreed on three key areas we should think about when we talk about future of transportation. So the biggest challenge we have today is carbon emission, our dependency on oil. Number two is sustainability, because in India, several states, you can't drive car after 15 years. So you have this large chunk of metal, which cost thousands and thousands of dollars to create. Now you don't know how to dispose it. And deaths. And when I started researching for this panel, I was blown away. There are 1.35 million deaths due to road accidents. It's a staggering number. Being an IITian, we have to figure out a way to solve it. So I have invited Vinay to talk about it and bring the best from the auto industry. So Mr. Pawan Goenka, our own, will be there, and he is going to have a chat with him. But before I hand it over to him, let's talk about Vinay a little bit, why I requested Vinay to help us. So Vinay has done a startup in India. So I was thinking about what is that startup? So in 1995, Mahindra and Ford created this small, tiny company. And Vinay was in the core team, managing team. It was a very little company with the vision to create something new and phenomenal. I'll let him talk about it. Vinay, floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And it's a pleasure to be amongst all of you. I can tell you, how amazed I was at when, Sanjeev introduced us to the fact that he's going to get everyone around the world together as much as possible on this one platform. And I think if there's one thing that, while we all talk about the sort of all the bad things that are happening with COVID, I think this is the most amazing thing that's happened in terms of being able to get the whole world together in a very easy platform. And I think we're going to see some of those changes also in the auto industry, which we'll talk about later. So yes, there's a lot of changes happening, and I think it'll be wonderful for understand it from a very Indian context and how varied it is between what's happening in India and what's happening in the rest of the world. And we couldn't have asked for a better expert and a practicing manager who's actually making that happen and making a difference to both the country and the world. I'd like to introduce Dr. Pawan Goenka, the Managing Director of Mahindra & Mahindra, who's often referred to as a captain of captains in the Indian auto industry, to share his insights, his experiences, and thoughts at this freewheeling chat that we're going to have about the future of transportation and how it could possibly, but more importantly, realistically look, and how we can actually put some big bets, on certain things that are going to happen. So thank you, Pawan, for joining us today on this global platform with our other fellow IIT and alumnus from around the world who, like me, are very eager to understand how you see the world and India literally, as we move ahead. 5 years, 10 years, and I think anything further, they'll ask us what strange things we're smoking. So let's just stick to about 10 years, right? So as the first question, The future of transportation clearly involves moving into a new, smarter source of energy, just like what Sanjiv had mentioned. There would be new modes of mobility. We're already beginning to see those introduced. And building that physical and the technological infrastructure to support such transportation and all these innovations. Is India lagging behind? There's a lot that's happening in the world. What's really holding it back? We've been hearing, the most common acronym that's being used nowadays to describe the mega trends is CASE. That's referred to as CASE, ACE, which is autonomous, connected technology, shared technology, and electrified technology. But frankly speaking, are we there yet? Are we really, can we expect an electrified, connected, and autonomous world and of shared mobility in India? How long will it take? And most importantly, are we going to miss that bus again? So love to hear your thoughts. You live it every day.
Vinay. Sorry. So are you saying the, TV series we used to watch in 80s and 90s, Star Trek? So that's not real. We can't press the button in 2050 and zoom to somewhere else. That's not happening. We are not going to talk about this. I'm going to drop off.
No, Sanjiv, you know what? A lot of those are coming to reality. And let's be honest, all those things are what are inspiring all these technologies to get involved. Everybody wants to see that Jetson car that's flying. We are beginning to see all that. And I think if we really talk about transportation in the bigger context, are we going to be flying? Are we going to be having maglev trains in a bigger way? Are we going to have hyperloops? All that is very much, a lot of it is happening. But when will we see it in a market like India? Can we see it in a country? It's going to be a very different sort of world that we're going to see in different phases and in different stages of how these are going to evolve. And I think that's very important, especially to our group, especially as IITians, because we want to be a part of that evolution, right? We want to be a part of that transfer.
Vinay, let's bring the man of the hour, Pawan, and I'll let you chat. And I'm going to just sit quiet and just enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjiv.
Okay, so thank you, Sanjiv. Let me first say that I'm going to keep my feet on the ground and not fly. So if you're looking for flying cars, you'll be disappointed because that's not what I'm going to talk about. Vinay, it's a pleasure to see you after a long time. I don't recall when was the last time we met, but very nice to see you on this forum. And thanks, Sanjiv, for organizing that. Pleasure to talk to IIT alumnus and future alumni of IIT. Really, it's been a very good 2 days of event. I've seen parts of it. And Sanjiv has put together a very impressive set of speakers, including the Prime Minister of India. I don't know how you manage that, but very nice speech by the Prime Minister. He always gives very nice speeches. And of course, accent. I didn't mean it in any other way. So, Vinay, you have asked a lot of things in your opening. I can probably talk for hours on if I was trying to combine everything that you had talked about. But let me start off by sort of separating out Indian situation to global situation, especially situation in developed markets like US, Europe, and so on. India is a large country, of course, but very densely populated, and population density perhaps is among the highest of large countries. And that brings different challenges for transportation, different priorities for transportation. So while it may be good to talk about what's happening in the Western world, but I think we need to look at our priorities somewhat differently. So let me sort of talk about 5-6 bullet points of how India's need right away. So let me first talk from 0 to 5 years before we talk beyond 5 years. How India's need right away are different. Sanjiv mentioned about accidents. Every day there are some 1,300 accidents in India, serious accidents. Every day about 400 people die, which is the highest number anywhere in the world. And it's certainly not a distinction that India would like to have. So perhaps in the short term, our biggest need is how do we make our transportation safe? Safe for people in the vehicle, safe for people outside the vehicle. Now, fortunately, India has made big strides in the last 2-3 years. Our safety norms for our vehicles have become almost same as Europe now. But we still have to work quite a bit on discipline of road uses, discipline of car uses. And unless we do that, just making cars safe will not make the accidents go away, will not make fatalities go away. But a lot of stride, a lot of quick sort of movement is happening in that direction. Second difference for India compared to Western world will be in emissions, tailpipe emission. And clearly, with the implementation of the latest emission norm called BS6 in India, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's equivalent to Euro 6. India has more or less caught up with Europe, but we have a large number of very old vehicles still on the road. So while the new vehicles are clean, the old vehicles still are pretty dirty in terms of tailpipe emission, and India has to somehow get those vehicles off the road, which is not easy because of affordability of new vehicles in India. And therefore, government is looking at a scrappers policy to incentivize sort of scrapping the old vehicles and looking at new vehicles. So that's sort of going to be the second difference for India. For India, the oil import is a very big drain on its economy. In terms of trade balance, about $130 billion worth of oil import, that is about 25% of import for India is for oil. And therefore, use of renewable energy, clean energy is even more important for India than for many other countries in the world. The road infra is clearly strained. And not only strained, there are still vast parts of India where we do not have good motorable roads. And it's estimated that the investment required to get the road infra to the level where we could have ease of transport moving from point A to point B runs in, I don't know the number, but it runs close to $1 trillion or thereabouts. So very large number. The fifth difference, I think, is the accessibility and affordability of transportation. Now in India, the penetration of cars, even though we make 2.5, 2.6 million cars every year, the penetration is amongst the lowest of large countries. We are at about 20 vehicles per 1,000 people, compared to US being at about 800 vehicles per 1,000 people. So the accessibility and affordability is very poor, and therefore that's another area of focus that India has to have. So if I was to start off, Vinay, with what you said, ACEs, that is autonomous, connected, electric, and shared, which is what gets talked about in various conferences, seminars, webinars. In India, I would change that slightly and not say ACEs, but say access, which is ACCESS, double C, double S. And A in case of India, I would say is not autonomous, but, and we can talk about autonomous, but not autonomous, but accessible. One C is clean, another C is connected, E is electric, S is safe, and another S is shared. So in India, the needs are somewhat different than what we have talked about. And then we can get into each one of these things as you sort of deem fit. But I would say that's what we need to focus on in India in the short term, 0 to 5 years, and then 5 to 10 years. So I'll stop here and give you a chance to come in, and then we can move forward.
No, that's sort of you took us through an amazing timeline there, Pawan, about the whole journey that we've gone through as a country. And I think the real thing that's going to come, I think, into play, especially what I think all of us in this forum are going to be really interested in as IITians, and those that are looking to change the world and also to bring in technology that will be very relevant, right, to this industry. So when you see a lot of the things was accessible, clean, connected. Now, I think the world is beginning to see a shift where more than automotive OEMs, so manufacturing, the power and the real innovation is happening in the technology side. And technology is being referred to mostly, as platforms where we see a lot of it is based upon the shared mobility, the applications and all. But the real technology, which is in the powertrain, which is in the materials, which is more in terms of the speed and to be done at an accessible and affordable way. There's a big difference, I think, what's happening in the rest of the world and what's possible here in India. So as a manufacturer and as a leading OEM in the country, where and personally, Where would you put your bets on? Which is that technology that will really make the change in the next 5 years, for example?
So Vinay, the world is changing so rapidly that we really don't know where to put our bets anymore. If we had put our bets a year ago someplace, today those bets will be all sort of in losses, right? But let me say that in this regard, there may not be as much difference between India and Western world, okay? Let's talk about R&D. You mentioned technological innovation that is happening. And I would put that in two buckets. One is the bucket of what one would call a traditional R&D, traditional innovation, which happens in powertrain, IC engine, which happens in hybrid vehicles, which happens in material technology, which happens in braking systems, stuff like that. And that's going on. But that's not going to disrupt the world. That is going to be a continuous improvement from where we are. Every few years, we'll get another 2-3% improvement in CO2 level. We'll get some reduction in emission level. We'll get some safety equipment and so on and so forth. Where the real disruption will happen is in connected, is in electric, is in shared. And that is no different for India than for the rest of the world. However, connected would probably mean something different in Indian context than in the global context. Shared would mean something different in Indian context than in global context. And electric also will mean something different in Indian context than global context. And I'll get into that one by one. But this innovation is not just coming from large OEMs or from IITs or stuff like that. It's coming from also a lot of startups. And many of those startups actually are from IITs. IIT Madras has a very large ecosystem. IIT Delhi has a very large ecosystem. IIT Bombay has a very large ecosystem. And a lot more is happening there. In fact, this morning itself, I was having a debate with with IIT Madras professors and director on how to make this ecosystem stronger. So a lot is happening in that area. And it's not just going to change technology. It is also going to change industry dynamics. Okay. What's OEM? That definition may change. What's a supplier? Who is service provider? Who owns the customer? Today, mostly OEMs own the customer, but tomorrow I don't think OEMs will own the customer. There will be the sandwich layer in between called MaaS, mobility as a service. And those service providers will own the customer. And once that happens, the whole dynamics changes, because we all know that the group or the company that owns the customer has the upper hand. And therefore the upper hand may move from OEMs, who today own the customer, to the mobility service providers, right? The Olas, Ubers of the world, who obviously have a lot going on, but I think it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and many different kinds of shared services will come in than what we know today. So in that sense, there will be a significant change, and that will happen. Now let me just hit on one point before you come in again, which is shared. What does shared mean in Indian context, and how is it different than in global context? In Indian context, shared does not mean that the demand for cars will go down. That's the big concern that auto industry has globally, that as shared becomes big and the same car gets used for 12 hours rather than for 3 hours, will the demand for cars come down? In India, that's not the case. And the reason I say that is that India, the demand for mobility is so underfulfilled that the shared will actually make mobility more accessible and affordable to those who cannot afford mobility today, and therefore increase demand of cars and not reduce. People who are buying cars today, except for few people, will continue to buy cars today. In fact, there was some survey done recently amongst millennials on would they want to own a car. And vast majority said yes, they would want to own a car if they can afford it. They may not want to drive the car. They may still want to take a Ola or a Uber, but they want to own a car, right? So therefore shared in India will actually going to fulfill the need of mobility rather than reduce the size of the industry. Though winners and losers will change, there will be many startups that will come. One of the things the electric vehicle does is it reduces or diminishes the entry barrier. A lot of people can easily come into certain segments, not all segments of mobility, and start providing mobility either as a product or as service. Or many of them are coming in now with the components that go into electric vehicles and competing with the big guys in the world. The small startup with 10 people started 3 years ago can give a run for the money to large established suppliers of BMS, VMS, motors, batteries, and so on and so forth. So therefore, you will see that nothing is guaranteed. Nobody can say that I'm a large company, $100 billion, nobody can touch me. In 5 years, that 100 billion could become 10 billion, could become 1 billion, you could disappear. And that's what each company has to look into. Whether you're in India, you're in Germany, you're in US, you're in Japan, does not make a difference. The whole startup ecosystem, with the change that is happening of connected, electric, and shared, these three changes are going to totally disrupt the dynamics of the industry.
Very true. And I think we're already
does that make sense to you, Vinay? You are a veteran in the industry. What do you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think the disruption is actually happening because it's now it's a customer requirement. I think the 2 points that you made, especially with regards to accessibility, the ownership of a car. Yes. The reason why we are so low is because it's still the economics of owning a car and all the taxation that come along with it really still makes it very difficult. And I think while millennials, the whole population is growing, we're seeing more migration towards cities. And we definitely are going to see a lot more users who are going to look at both options, the ownership as well as the shared options. And I think it's going to be a hybrid. You're going to find people who may want to have a certain type of vehicle for the week when they're working, and they want another type of vehicle for the weekend when they want to drive, intercity. We're going to see a whole lifestyle change that's going to emerge as we also get to the new millennial group of customers. So I don't think all OEMs have quite figured out the change that technology is going to bring to it. I think they're looking at it from a user pattern. And that's where I think most OEMs already have a strategy today of being in the business of mobility. They're no longer calling themselves, we're in the business of manufacturing and launching new cars or trucks. It's now about mobility, it's about transportation. That whole definition and paradigm has started to shift, and the whole business model is now based not on a per piece cost, but on a per mile kind of usage, and also the utility of that asset. Is it used 20%? I mean, that is really the big resource sucker, that it takes away all that capital, but actually just use 10 or 15 or 5% of the time. So there's a lot of work that needs to be evolved in that area. But where I'd like to now, take our discussion to is that this whole, integration that's required for all these technologies to come together. As you mentioned, there's a lot of stakeholders. You can have an electrified technology. You can actually have the suppliers. It's so much easier with the fewer parts. But will we have the charging stations? Will we be able to actually bring about the kind of infrastructure that is required across the country to be able to deliver that? How will OEMs and the public policy come together to make for something that could actually facilitate this expansion? And one last point is that, do we see more and more sort of involvement also with OEMs, with institutes like IITs, working collaboratively to develop technology to make sure that this integration between the public policy makers, the manufacturers, bring, there's some harmony that comes in, we have some common standards. Otherwise, each manufacturer and each technology is doing their own thing. They need to come together somewhat, don't they?
Yeah. So, Vinay, to really able to answer this question or get into this debate, one has to understand the evolution of Indian automotive industry and then put that into context. Now, Indian automotive industry had like 3 phases, I would say. Pre-Maruti, pre-liberalization and the phase that we are in today, right? And Maruti, in a sense, at that time, redefined what Indian automotive industry was. Those who are old enough would know that at that time you had to book a car and wait for 5 years to get a delivery, right? Maruti for the first time came in and said, look, we're going to make cars available at an affordable price to upper middle class. Right? And that was like a big change that happened. But what did Maruti do? Maruti did not start at that time, at least, doing any kind of R&D, product development, engineering in India. It was all Suzuki. What they did was they bring in supplier base. In many cases, suppliers came from Japan, made joint ventures in India with Indian suppliers. And that's how the whole Indian supplier base started in mid-80s. The second phase was when India liberalized its economy in 1991. And this is when many of the OEMs, including GM, Ford, all of them started coming into India. And it was not until about late 90s that we had a significant critical mass of auto companies that were existing in India. Today, of course, we have almost every company in the world that has a presence in India, because nobody wants to lose out on this market of 2.7, 2.8 million vehicles, and still underpenetrated market. Okay, and then we saw the sort of, but even in this time, when all the MNCs came in, nobody designed cars for India. They all brought in a model from somewhere. They did a CKD operation. They did some sourcing in India, but mostly imported and made the cars. The real change started happening from about 2000, 20 years ago. And 20 years ago for an auto industry is not as long as one might think in an IT industry or electronics industry. Maybe I'm thinking old time, and maybe the new startups will say 20 years is very long even for auto industry, but I'm about to retire, so I can still say that. Now, what happened from 2000 to 2020 is when the real growth of industry happened, not just in terms of volume. Volume is just one part of it, but in terms of the industry maturing to a level where India could design cars, India could develop and test cars, India could manufacture every component that goes into a car, and India could export cars and get to the world-class quality. I wouldn't say it is at the level of where we want to be right now, but certainly reached a point where we can export cars. In fact, Vinay, your ex-company Ford exports to USA. The only company that exports from India to USA is Ford Motor Company, and EcoSport is sold in US in 40,000-50,000 a year. So in this time, when technology came in and we started doing product development, and now today almost every major OEM who is present in India has R&D center, or I would say product development center in India, with thousands of employees who are working there doing product development for India and helping in global product development. There are very few cars that are launched today in India, and this is a very major change, and people outside may not appreciate this change. There's no car that is launched in India which is not designed for India. No company can, and I'm not talking about the Mercedes and Audi, which those are very high-end cars. So I'm leaving that out. I'm talking the mass market car. Nobody can succeed in India by launching a car that is not designed for India. You will never meet customer expectation. You will never meet cost targets. You will never meet regulation for that matter, right? So every car sold in India is designed for India, and more often than not, designed in India. And that's a very major change. And now that is bringing out the R&D that you're talking about, the ecosystem that we are developing for R&D. Now,
so Pawan, this is a very interesting question, and I'm getting some WhatsApp messages and everybody's loving what you're saying. So question I have is interesting for you. So one is what you are saying, we have a driver driving your car. So people normally don't drive the car. So that change is very interesting. But funny thing is people sit on the back seat and they take their sleepers off or shoes off. Is that one of the criteria to have a car in India?
Sorry, I missed that part.
So most of the people, they take their shoes off and they sit, they put their feet on the seats in the back seat. So do you need a space to store your shoes there? Sleepers there? What is the Indian standard? You know, you said an interesting thing, but this is not making any sense to me. Okay, the roads are different. It's the same thing.
I think you are talking like the way I used to hear when I was in US, lived in US, that are there cows on Indian roads? Yes, there are cows on Indian roads. That doesn't mean that Indian roads are full of cows, right? So there will be some people like the ones that you have just talked about, but I don't recall ever taking off my shoes and putting my feet up. Or anybody traveling with me who has taken off their shoes. Taking off my shoes, yes, but putting my feet up, no. Right?
So Pawan, on a serious note, tell us a little bit more. What is the India criteria?
There's a very important thing here. The reason many of the global cars have failed in India, because they were designed for the driver. To succeed in India, the cars have to be designed for the second row passenger. The second row passenger would occasionally drive the car. It's not that they won't drive the car. But if you don't provide comfort in the second row, you cannot succeed in your car. The owner's seat is second row left.
Correct.
The second row left seat has to be the most comfortable seat in your car.
Second row left.
That's the owner's
seat. That's interesting. That is interesting.
And so if I can add on,
if you look at all Mahindra cars, that is the most comfortable seat that we have.
So massage chair is not in the front, it's in the back.
That is correct.
Interesting.
And Sanjiv, I can tell you that
these are the things that global MNCs realized, that Indian consumer is very different. And Indian requirements are very different. And today, a car design in Korea, for example, if it's not done with India in mind, would not have that much focus on the second row, because in Korea, everybody drives the car. Second row is used only by children, right? Or occasionally by friends and relatives. So okay, coming back to Vinay's question on R&D, it's a very, very important question. And I would have to admit that the R&D penetration of cars being designed in India coming from Indian R&D is very little. All the multinationals more or less depend on R&D being done somewhere else and bringing it into the Indian product development. And Indian MNCs also tend to bring in technology and R&D through consultants or joint venture partners from somewhere else. Every Indian company has a partner, right, of some kind, not an ownership partner, but there's a joint venture somewhere that something has been done. And if there was one thing that I would like to say that Indian automotive industry now has to do, we have come a long ways from where we were in late 90s to where we are now, is to really bring in the R&D element, which is done in India, creating IP and bringing that IP into Indian car. Just like we said earlier, that a car not designed for Indian consumer will not succeed in India. We also have to say that a car that does not have Indian R&D is missing out on something that is unique for India. And I'm beginning to see that happening, but I would have liked to see it at a much higher level today than where it is. And IITs can play a very big role. And let me say this very, very unambiguously, that the R&D capability of IITs is one of the most underestimated capability. Since I am associated with IIT Madras and IIT Bombay now also, I kind of see what is happening there. And I can tell you, those of you in USA, that the IIT capability and R&D capability in IIT is comparable to most US universities, even the top ones. What we do not have is a good marketing of that R&D. We have very little funding. I mean, you would be amazed that IIT Madras, as large as it is and one of the largest R&D budget that any IIT has, the total budget is less than $100 million. Less than $100 million total budget with 800 faculty members. You can imagine how under sort of budgeted R&D is. And the kind of work that they produce out of that is mind-boggling, simply mind-boggling. So if we are able to bring the Indian industry to work with the academia, especially IITs, and I would have to admit that most of the good academic research today happens in IITs. And that unfortunately is a fact. And there's an IIT gathering, so I think they won't mind me saying that. In another gathering, I may get sort of trolled for saying that, but here it's okay. So I think this is an area where we really need to focus on. Forget the auto industry for a minute, but an area where we really need to focus on is area that we really need to focus on is how do we leverage the R&D capability that IITs have, bring it to the industry, where industry really has to play a part of pulling on that. Unfortunately, there are many Indian industry that will go and spend $1 million doing R&D at MIT, and they won't spend 2 crores doing R&D in an IIT.
Okay.
And we have to change that mindset that IITs can do as good and as relevant research for industry as an MIT or a Stanford or Harvard can do. Sorry, you got me off onto a different path, and this is one of my.
Pawan, I think you know what?
It's my favorite too, Pawan, and that's one of the reason I joined the IIT Delhi Excellence Foundation, and Vinay is my counterpart in India. And this is my big mission: is how do we bring research and development and collaborate with 23 IITs and bring interesting opportunities, interesting projects from America. So, because our world is more connected than it used to be. I mean, just imagine 10 years ago, this conference, I would have never thought is even possible, right? Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I designed the vehicle tracking system in 1997. So I consider myself really, really smart. I used to, not anymore. Okay. Every day is phenomenal. So you are absolutely right. So that is the reason I invited you and Vinay, where we need help from people like you. Help us build that blueprint. I'm here. There are 500,000 of us globally in 100+ countries. We are here to support. Where we need help is, let's put together a plan where you get involved, where we have 23 IITs involved. IIT Delhi, I already have Professor Rao said, Sanjiv, do whatever you want to do. We have 3,000+ PhD students, 3,000. It's remarkable. So let's do something meaningful.
Nope. So if I can summarize what you just said, Sanjiv and Pawan.
After the conference sometime, and there is a lot that can be done. I think I don't want to sound very negative on this because things are changing rapidly. The only sort of disappointment that I have is they should have changed 10 years ago. And we would be in a different place today than what we are. I think 10 years from now, we'll be in a very good shape because IITs also have changed their approach to R&D. They do understand that writing papers and publishing papers has no value other than getting promotions for faculty members, right? The real value is how does that research translate to a product or a service? If it doesn't translate to a product or a service, it's of no value beyond a certain point, right? And that is really the realization has happened already. And when I sit in the board of governor meeting at IIT Madras or even IIT Bombay now, nobody talks about courses. That's given, right? Academic excellence of IITs is given. You don't have to talk about it. BOG members don't have to discuss that at all. Right? What we discuss is what are we doing for R&D? That's all we discuss. I mean, half of a BOD meeting is used in discussing R&D, right? Another half is used in discussing how do we make faculty members, students, employers, all sort of feeling that this is the best place to be in. And therefore, a lot is changing there. And the IIT Madras Research Park, IIT Bombay Research Park, IIT Delhi Research Park, these are infrastructure that have been created in the last 10 years. And I have not seen IIT Bombay Research Park, but IIT Madras Research Park, if you're ever in Chennai, please do visit. You would be absolutely amazed
I have seen it. It's phenomenal, Pawan. But we can sit and talk to you for hours, Pawan. I can't even tell you how excited I am. And thank you very much to both of you. We have to close our panel, but we saved best for the last, and you two have delivered. Thank you for that. And let's talk after offline. I am really passionate about it, and we are going to do a phenomenal
Sanjiv, if I can just make one last statement, the validation that Pawan has just given, that the future is in our hands. We just have to have that confidence and that collective effort all together. We have the resources and the platform with our institutes. If we put it all together along with industrialists such as Pawan and others, anything is possible in the next 10 years. So let's keep at it.
Let's do in 5.
IIT alumni can change India.
Pawan, we put together global segment in less than 2 weeks. I think we can do in 5, not in 10.
All right.
We do impossible things. Thank you.
Thanks, Pawan. Wonderful discussion. Thanks, Sanjiv, for the opportunity. And
wait. Pawan, there is a photo up in few seconds, but this is phenomenal. I really had such an amazing time. Learned so much new things. I thought I knew a lot about self-driven car, even flying cars. I even invested in the company, by the way. They didn't go anywhere. It's just me, crazy things. But I truly believe India has to think differently. And India and US, we have to create a bridge. And we really need people like you. And even the organization like Tesla, we have to come close and create some global level initiative, because we are building things in silos. And that's not interesting. We can't do that. We can't waste human talent. See, this mind, as somebody said, is not a thing to waste. Together, we can do phenomenal stuff. So please find ways. I'm here. I will sell for it. I will sell for 23 IITs. That's my promise. And I think I'm a heck of a sales guy. I sold both of you, and I sold 500,000 IIT to make me the conference chair. What are my credentials? So it's fun. It's so much fun. And I'm repeating again, we put together this global segment literally in less than 2 weeks. And look at the speakers we got. I mean, I am blown away what we did. And thanks to my global segment chair, Kalpen and Rohit Koshi. These two guys are like tireless. Rohit hasn't slept in the last 1 week. So yes, I disagree with you. We will do it, and we'll definitely do it, but we need a lot of support. I hope you can find time for us, and together, let's really make it happen. IIT 2020, as I'm telling everyone, it is a movement. We have started a movement. This is not just a small Pan IIT USA initiative. We have sparked phenomenal opportunities. I am getting so many messages from e-cells, from the students. I mean, IIT BHU, a place I never thought, they get 3,000 startups every year to pitch in their pitch competition. 3,000 in Banaras. Have you ever thought? Sorry, I'm not saying IIT BHU is bad, but I'm saying in a small town where all I remember is the temple and the river, River Ganges. So phenomenal work we are doing. I mean, any parting thoughts for us, Pawan?
Well, first I would say you did an amazing job in organizing this conference, and compliments to you and the team that you have here. I just cannot figure out how you put all of this together. Really great job done. I believe that IIT and IITians have a very special role to play, I would say for India, but one can say for globally also, but I'm going to restrict to India. And the reason I say that is that IIT has the best brains of India even today in them, whether as faculty members or as students. And we need to channel that power, the brain power that we have, in the right direction. It is very important that IITians spend their career adding value to the country through technology, through industry, and through making life better for all fellow citizens. And if we all pull our resources together, it can be done. I mean, when I talk to IIT alumni, those who are not in India, everybody is so committed to do their bit to help. And I think IIT need to do a little bit better job in reaching out to these alumni who are outside India to see how we can use their power in terms of their presence, their knowledge, and also, of course, their money also to be able to do more and more in IITs. If you look at infrastructure in IIT and you go to infrastructure in any university in USA, you would feel sad. I feel sad when I go to a MIT or a Harvard or Stanford, any place, U of M, and I come back and look at IIT. I said, why should IITs be where they are? Can't we have a little better infrastructure? It doesn't require billions of dollars, but we just need to find that money and make it happen. So sort of a plan to how do we make IITs have, I wouldn't say infrastructure like an MIT or a Stanford, but infrastructure much better than what we have. Channel our brain power to where we can add value to the country or to the globe or to the humankind, I should say, is what we need to work on. I'll stop there. I can be on my soapbox forever, but I'll stop there.
No, wonderful. Thank you, Pawan. That was very inspiring and extremely motivating to know, and encouraging to know how we can collectively make such a huge difference. And I think there's no limit to that. So thank you. And I think we've run out of time. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to working together for the next Pan IIT to make it even and take a cross check as to how far we progressed. Thank you.